The Garden of Eden was the place where God created the first man, Adam, and where Adam created the first woman, Eve. Both of these events took place in Eden. Notwithstanding the significance of this location, the question of where exactly on our planet the Garden of Eden can be found has been a topic of discussion for ages. The Bible makes it quite obvious that the Garden of Eden did not only exist as a site in myth, rather, it was a real garden with a real location. Where exactly is it then? The biblical Garden of God referred to in the book of Genesis in connection with the creation of man is referred to as the Paradise of Eden. The name Paradise has also been given to this particular garden. In the Morgan Freeman narrated documentary, The Story of God, archaeologist Joni Magnus explains how she realized she has the answer after unearthing a church in Jerusalem. Magnus explained how her discovery of a church in Jerusalem brought her to this conclusion. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre stands on the traditional site of Jesus' burial and subsequent resurrection in the Old City of Jerusalem. Golgotha is the name given to this area because of the hill that is located nearby, which was formerly known as Calvary. According to Dr. Magnuson's findings, it also appears that Adam was laid to rest there. When asked in 2017 where Christians believed Jesus was crucified, she said, "Beneath the rock of Golgotha, the rocky outcrop on which Christians believe Jesus was crucified." The Garden of Eden, also known as Paradise, is one metaphor for the place where God's presence is felt. The location denoted by both names is the same. The Adam Chapel can be found just below, and its association with the first man Adam can be traced back to the first days of the Christian church where the story was originally told. It is said that after Jesus' crucifixion, his blood flowed down through a crack in the rock on which he was crucified, which is above us. The Bible says, "And Adam, the first man, was buried underneath," implying that he was placed there literally, but that he was later raised from the dead after receiving a few drops of Jesus' blood. The viewpoint is completely inconsistent with the picture painted by the Bible. The book of Genesis identifies several rivers that flowed near the Garden of Eden, including the Pishon, Gihon, Chedekel, and Firat. This lends support to the theory that the garden was located in what is now known as Iraq, but was then known as southern Mesopotamia. But Dr. Magnus explained how this supports an idea she has, and then she added, "Now the version that ended up in the book of Genesis looks to locate the Garden of Eden someplace in Mesopotamia. Nonetheless, we believe Adam had a unique bond with the holy city of Jerusalem, Eden's garden, and the temple." The Genesis account of creation and the biblical account of the Garden of Eden are two of the most reliable resources we have for learning about the ancient temple. We can see the paradisiacal state of Eden and the creation of the world reflected in the building of the temple, which was seen as a model of the cosmos. Several features of the temple were intended to make Israelite worshippers feel as though they were back in the Garden of Eden. Cedar was used extensively in the construction of the temple, and the Bible records that Solomon carved all the walls of the building round about with carved representations of cherubim and palm trees and open flowers, within and without. Even without the cherubim, the palm trees and flowers would be enough to evoke thoughts of Eden, but they seal the deal. In fact, Paradise is the only other place in the Bible where cherubim appear beside the temple and God's throne. The furnishings inside the temple were likewise designed to evoke a garden. Two massive pillars flanking the entrance to the inner court were decked with lilies and 200 pomegranates each to give the impression of two enormous trees. The golden menorah in the sanctuary was envisioned as a tree just like its pillars. Its description includes references to branches, flowers, and bowls formed like unto nuts. Each of the 10 lampstands in the inner sanctuary was shaped like a tree, creating an atmosphere not unlike entering a forest. The ancient Hebrews were not fooled by the front of the temple, which gave the impression of a garden. Legend has it that the main hall's pillars and lampstands inspired the prophet Zechariah to see a man standing among the trees of the tabernacle. The psalmist also compares the righteous to a palm tree. They have taken root in the Lord's temple. The sanctuary's animal sculptures further contributed to the illusion that visitors were in a garden. A large bronze laver supported by 12 oxen and adorned with lily blooms stood in the temple, and smaller wash basins depicting lions, oxen, and cherubims were also there. The garden that inspired Solomon's temple was not just any garden, it was Eden, and many of the figures from the Garden of Eden narratives may be found there. 2 cherubim, each 15 feet tall, stood vigil at the entrance to the Holy of Holies in the temple, just as they did at the Garden of Eden's Tree of Life. The temple priest stood in for Adam, and the serpent made an appearance as well. According to 2 Kings 18:4, the metal serpent that Moses cast in the desert became an integral part of Jewish ritual, though the righteous king Hezekiah opposed this practice. The temple's construction story is also intertwined with the creation account. There are several language parallels between the Genesis story of creation and the narrative of the tabernacle's construction under Moses. Using the term Spirit of God, Moses and God saw all the work done, and then once they finished the work, they blessed the world and the tabernacle. Moses enters God's presence on the seventh day of his stay at Sinai. He receives 7 separate sets of tabernacle instructions, and the building story is broken up into 7 sections, with the refrain, "As the Lord commanded Moses." The pattern used to build Solomon's temple is similar. It took 7 years to build, was dedicated during a festival lasting 7 days in the 7th month, and featured 7 requests from King Solomon in his prayer. To sum up, the temple was a real microcosm, and the biblical author made considerable efforts to demonstrate the thematic connections between the building and the events of Genesis 1-3. While the obvious parallel between Eden and the temple's ornamentation stands out at first glance, the ties between the two go far deeper than that. For instance, it is commonly stated that the temple is situated atop a mountain. Mount Zion, the mountain of the Lord's dwelling, and the mountain of the Lord's inheritance are all names for the location. Ezekiel's description of the Garden of Eden places it on a mountain, just like the temple, because in cultures which have a heaven, earth, and hell, the mountain's center is the axis along which these 3 cosmic areas are connected, and where communion between them becomes possible. The relationship between mountains and temples was so intimate that the line between them was often blurred. Ezekiel 28:13-14 states that upon the holy mountain of God is where Eden, the garden of God, can be found. God's presence was centered in Eden, which serves as a temple. Both Eden and the temple, symbolically represented by mountains, are the origins of rivers that bring life to the surrounding land. The Tigris, Euphrates, Pison, and Gihon are the 4 branches of the original river that flowed through Eden. The Gihon spring supplied the temple with water, and the resurrected temple of the millennium is depicted with a river flowing out of its foundation to water the soil, Adam's priestly role. The temple's design, its sacred function, and its ornamentation all evoke Eden in symbolic ways. As was previously indicated, the temple also had representations of many of the other characters from the Eden myth, including Adam, who was personified by the priest. This is evidenced by the similarity between the roles, the clothes they wore, and the kinds of things they did at their various temples. A priest's duties in the temple included acting as an intermediary between God and the people. At first, they stood in for the people in God's court. From personal sacrifices to national disasters, the priest stood in for the people and interceded with God on their behalf. Conversely, priests were the people's representatives of God, as evidenced in Deuteronomy 19:17 and 1 Samuel 1:17. The priest acted as the Lord's representative and spoke on his behalf whenever someone wanted to approach him. Adam is portrayed as a hybrid of God and man in the biblical account of the Garden of Eden. As his Hebrew name Adam suggests, he is the ideal male. His character in the Garden of Eden narrative represents all humans, and his fall from naivete to disobedience mirrors our own. Despite his obvious human symbolism, Adam is also frequently used to represent God. Being God's reflection, he is tasked with having dominion over the world, wherever on the planet. His very presence in the garden serves as a reminder of his function as God's ambassador in the ancient Near Eastern culture, where ancient monarchs would build up pictures of themselves in faraway countries over which they governed. To symbolize Yahweh's dominion over the land, Adam was fashioned in his likeness. Adam is also represented in ancient writings out of Genesis dressed as a priest. Ezekiel likens the king of Tyre to an exiled Adam in his prophecy of the king's downfall. The sardius, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the carbuncle, and the gold. All of these were thy coverings in Eden, the garden of God. This is not just a random list of gems. Every one of these stones can be found on the breastplate of the high priest. Genesis Rabbah, an old collection of rabbinic commentary, contains a less blatant parallel. In this passage, Adam is described as wearing garments that were like a torch. This alludes to the holiness ascribed to the clothing of the priests, and later biblical authors similarly describe priests as clothed with salvation and clothed with righteousness. There are references to priests wearing a holy and splendid vestment in sources beyond the Bible as well. Even the terminology used to describe Adam's labor in the Garden of Eden is identical to that used to describe the job of priests in the temple. Numbers 3:7 instructs the priests to watch the charge of the sanctuary and keep its service. This is the primary responsibility of the priesthood. The parallel between Adam and the priest is also found in non-biblical stories of Adam and Eve. Both the pseudo-epigraphic works, Lives of Adam and Eve and the Book of Moses, depict Adam as a priestly figure who offers sacrifices and collects incense to burn as an offering to God. According to the life of Adam and Eve, Solomon constructed the temple on the very spot where Adam used to pray, a belief supported by rabbinic tradition. Eden is portrayed both within and outside the Bible as a temple where God's presence resides, and Adam is portrayed within this temple as a priest. It wouldn't be accurate to argue that the temple was merely a representation or recreation of Eden due to the close relationship between these two realms. The Garden of Eden represented the original temple in the ancient mind, a survival of the original paradise lost to the profane world. The Jerusalem temple was a relic of a bygone era of spiritual purity. Having established the connection between Eden and the temple and between Adam and the priest, we can now look at the use of naming in the creation stories to understand how ritual renaming might have functioned in the ancient temple. This connects the pathological with the eschatological, the primal with the final, preserving Eden and providing a taste of the life of intimacy with God. That's all for the video today. We will be right back with more. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.